Paul here from My Perfect Failure, helping you turn your failures into successes and your setbacks into opportunities. Did you know that one angel investment in a comic book company could spark a revolution in Africa's startup ecosystem? My guest today not only made it happen, but has dedicated his career to empowering entrepreneurs across the continent. Meet Tomi Davies, a pioneering angel investor and tech innovator, whose journey began with a passion for engineering and computing. From global roles at Marks and Spencer and Ernst Young to building Africa's largest angel investor network, TD's story is one of ambition and transformation. In this episode, we discuss TD's groundbreaking Poem framework for evaluating startups, his remarkable investments like Super, Strikers and Sproxil, and how he's bridging diverse African markets to fuel innovation. You also learn his thoughts on how startups can align with global goals to drive social impact. This conversation inspired me to think differently about the power of innovation and the role we can all play in creating change. TD's insights are a must-hear for anyone passionate about startups or investing. Join us for this inspiring journey. Hit play and discover how TD is reshaping the future of entrepreneurship in Africa and beyond.
Who knows what Jay-Z, J.K. Rowling, Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey all have in common? Okay, I will tell you then. They have all overcome failure in one shape or form to go on to gain success in their respective careers. Welcome to My Perfect Failure. Join us as we delve into the world of our perfect failures. We will interview, explore and discuss how our perfect failures can lead us to success. Join us and tune in.
Welcome everybody to another episode of My Perfect Failure. Today, I'm incredibly excited because I have another amazing guest for you. So our guest today is the Collaborator-in-Chief at TVC Labs, an innovation hub in Lagos, Nigeria, a co-founder of Zeitec and the Lagos Angel Network. He also serves as the founding president of the African Business Angel Network. Over his career, he has led the tech-driven initiatives for major brands, including Marks and Spencer, Ernst Young, across Europe and Africa and the US. Since 2000, he has focused on tech innovation in Africa, inspiring with his books, The African Project Manager and Investment-Worthy Startup. He actively supports Africa startup ecosystem by championing tech as a tool for economic and social impact. So a very warm welcome to My Perfect Failure, TD. How are you, TD?
I'm exceedingly well. Thank you very much. If I was any better, I'd be worried.
Amazing, amazing. So just for everybody listening and watching, that was an incredibly condensed shrink wrap version of TD. In the show notes, I'll put a more comprehensive bio of TD just because you've done so much. And literally, if I was to reel off your full bio, it would probably go on for like 30 minutes or so. So I just wanted to give everybody a flavor of TD. Just to give everybody a snapshot how I was fortunate enough to come across even TD. So I signed up to attend London Tech Week, and I was keen just to make it as a rich experience as possible. And I went on that they put up this little portal where you could connect with people. So I found TD on there and I thought, wow, he's speaking. I need to definitely go and hear his talk, but also I would love to see whether I could meet him. So I message you. And clearly pretty much everybody on that platform was doing exactly the same thing. So I arrived at your talk. Your talk was packed, couldn't get in there. So I was standing on a sort of a platform so I could hear, watch, and listen. Literally, I got there a fraction too late, couldn't get in. And it was everybody was taking notes, captivated, done the talk. I think you had some other lovely, really insightful panelists as well that were there with you. And then I thought, you know what, I would love to see whether I can get TD on the podcast. So I thought, okay, literally, I'm going to wait around. I waited, and you just had this scrum of people that just wanted to capture as much as they possibly could from you. So I thought, you know what, he's going to be there for a while. So let me go away, come back, and then speak to TD. So I went away, came back. This scrum hasn't gone down. It's still at the same as it was like 10 minutes ago. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go away and come back again. And it was still busy. So I did that 3 times. I came back, and this is probably about 30 minutes, 35 minutes or so. And I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna hang around. And I managed to sort of, you know, grab you for about 5 minutes, or probably less than that, and just say, thank you, really inspired by your talk. And then you were whisked away. You were whisked away by somebody to go to another talk in London somewhere. And then kindly, you gave me probably a couple of months ago, you gave me half an hour or so, or maybe a fraction longer. We had a lovely talk, and you agreed to be a guest on My Perfect Failure. So thank you so much. I wanted to say thank you.
My pleasure.
So your background to me is fascinating, and you've got this wonderful, rich history, and there's so much knowledge that you have researching you. There's so many different areas you can go into, the tech, there's a corporate side, there's the knowledge that you've captured over the years. Where I wanted to start really is at the beginning, sort of you as a child, because you've got this innovation and tech is very significant in your past, the present, and I'm sure it's going to be the same in the future. So I was wondering, as a child, were you quite curious as a child?
Well, I grew up on space, and you know, my earliest memories are of Speed Racer, of yeah, we have Flintstones and things like that. But the ones that really got me were things like Star Trek. You know, the whole idea of teleportation, for example, is one that I still believe, you know, and it's funny, you find like minds across as you go through. There's a gentleman um, who is actually working, you know, on the potential for teleportation. Um, and I, for one, you know, what I'm still looking ahead to that was from the past is when we have uh, light-based computing, you know, which people are telling me, yeah, but we'll get there. So the point being, I'm fascinated by the fact that we're just a dot in time. And you can describe whether you believe the world is 1 billion years old or it's only a few hundred years old is irrelevant. The point is, you cannot debate time's existence and the fact that it's a continuum that is ever evolving. So if you take that, you know, as read, then it becomes what is manifesting within the context of time. And if you are part of that, then your responsibility, this is where it becomes subjective, and this is TD's perception now. Your responsibility is value creation. So it is actually to be a delta, that is, to actually produce more than you consume of anything, um, so that those around can benefit and we therefore become part of the expansion rather than part of the reduction. But
Okay.
again, that's a philosophical debate, but I trust
Yeah.
that with context.
Yeah, no, that provides really great context, actually. So do you, in terms of your creativity, in terms of how you think, do you place any limits on that? Because when you talk about Star Trek and space was something that you were interested in as a child. Obviously, over the years, we've gone to space and we go to space and different things happen. Does that give you more freedom in terms of your creativity and potentially in how you listen maybe to founders who approach you about maybe some ideas that they've got that might to maybe people that are less creative, they might view them as far-fetched and a non-starter?
Well, I for one, I separate ideas from founders because ideas are just a multiplier for execution. So when we're talking about building a business, it's a totally different thing from playing around with ideas. So, for example, I could talk you through the mechanics and the potential of holographic imaging. Okay. I've even, for those who know, one of my roles historically, I was the chief operating officer for a mobile network operator in Nigeria. And just to prove the point, I launched the network using holographic imaging. And guess what? I'm talking of 2012.
Wow.
Okay. So the point being, ideas are lovely. All right. But if we're talking of businesses with economic impact, there are a whole set of parameters that the idea has to be filtered through for it to be commercially viable with sustainable impact. I
Okay.
hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And that there's almost so when you research you definitely get into the minutiae, the nuance of investment as from I guess from both perspectives, from a investor's perspective, how your eye is trained to understand, I guess, the idea, but also from a founder's perspective, it's really good to study you, study your material because you give people the framework to make sure that the idea that they have has gone through almost the foundational process to make sure it's solid, that the idea is solid, they've got a customer base, there's a financial model, they've got a good user group, all those fundamentals. I definitely not educated enough to break it down succinctly as you do and can. What's refreshing for me, having researched you, is you learn a lot just from reading your content or listening to your content. What I wanted to go back to, maybe we can approach this again, but what I wanted to capture a little bit for people that maybe aren't familiar with TD is your extraordinary background. Your parents, they, to my mind, they set high standards. Before we hit the record button, you gave me a snapshot of not just you, but your siblings and the kind of the curious nature and the high standards that you all adhere to today.
Yeah, well, as I was saying to you earlier, um, one could argue that my primary driver is not wanting to be the lesser son of a greater father. And that is set in context of the fact that, you know, my mom's dad, my grandfather, okay, you can imagine being a Barclays bank manager in the 1930s in Nigeria, but I can come back to him in a second. My dad, okay, I mean, geez, the guy was knighted by the French, okay, Chevalier
Wow,
de l'Ordre. No, seriously, was Chevalier de l'Ordre National du Mérite Français Industriel,
that's
okay.
incredible.
Yeah, he was also Queen's Counsel. So you look at someone like that, and the reason he shipped us back to Nigeria in 59 was in 1960, he became Nigeria's first Minister of Trade and Industry. So
Phenomenal.
yeah, that's sort of context number one. And then we were the second family. The first batch, I had an elder brother, and my elder brother was enshrined in song by King Sunny Ade. Um, because he had put together the first, along with his co-founders, the first ever indigenous advertising company in Nigeria, Rod Publicity. The ROD were their initials. The D stood for Davis in Rod. So, that's sort of up there. And then, in case you think you're just looking up, my kid sister, my immediate kid sister, Fumigoka, is the first ever female deputy managing director of a big oil firm in Nigeria. She was DMD for Ajipoil. And, she's on the board of God knows how many newspapers and stuff right now. But you look at that, you look at the fact that Dele, my even younger brother, is the deputy vice chancellor at the medical school, University of Nebraska. And yeah, you sort of want to make sure that you put in a fair representation yourself.
Was there competition, or was it just very organic for you guys to aim to deliver your best and go wherever that direction may be?
All different trajectories.
Yeah.
The only common factor is the strive for excellence.
Excellence is a good bar to strive for. So you ended up studying in Miami. How did that come about? Were you always going to study overseas? Had you ever considered staying, whether in Nigeria, or was it a fairly logical decision for you to study overseas?
You know how to pick the stories. No, it wasn't.
I did. So I didn't know this. So I'm excited to hear the story.
A whole bunch, I attended the second part of my secondary school was at St. Gregory's College in Ikoyi Obalende, Lagos. And I had just done what we call YX, school cert, aced it and all of that kind of, and it was like, what's next? And everybody was heading to the States. So it was, okay, guys, States time. And my dad was like, what? Nope. Sorry, guy. I think you're too, whatever it is, you shouldn't do that. So as I told you, he was global. So half the time, just like I am now, half the time wasn't in the country. So while he was away, I plotted, organized, schemed, and I got myself admission. And in those days, it was easy to do all kinds of, like I got a scholarship to take me there. So I ended up in the States, wrong university. Why? Because I woke up one morning. I was in, yeah, America, all fun and games. We can talk about the stories of discrimination or racism till the cows comes home, but we can have that a different conversation.
Yeah.
But what happened? Okay, you can remember I'm from Lagos, beaches. The worst thing we get is rain and Hamatan. I wake up one morning and you know what? The only thing I can see is this darkness. Where's the sun? Go outside. I had a Fiat X19. It's a wedge-shaped. It was a wedge-shaped sports car. The only thing I could see was the antenna. It was all covered in snow. To cut the long story short, that's how I ended up in Miami.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So you thought, okay, I need to maybe have a look at the US landscape and see where's the best place for me to land. And
you got it.
So what did you study in Miami?
All right. You're really getting into it. Okay.
I am. I'm fascinated by you. Fascinated by your journey.
Was I went to America. Like I told you, I was always fascinated by space. So I went to study aeronautical engineering because I wanted to get into space tech.
Okay.
That was my
right. So, okay. So I'm seeing the correlation even from you as a child.
That was so I got into Miami and I was doing my private pilot's license. Okay. The way it works, especially if you're doing it the way I was doing, because I was self-funded because my dad wasn't having anything to do with me. It was like, you're on your own. If you choose to go to America, first of all, I don't think that's right. And then you want to be a pilot. That's like being, a bus driver, as far as I'm concerned.
Really?
That was, yeah. Yeah, my dad was old school.
Your dad, wow,
No
wow.
prisoners. So if you want to do that, you're on your own, you know. So to do that, you had to go through junior college. So I went to Miami-Dade and started, to complement my flying lessons. Um, got my private pilot and then ran into this guy, Professor Lionel Howard. And Lionel Howard, you have to do something called electives. So I took this thing called, I can't remember, History of Computing or something. Anyway, his first class, I took it, I aced it. He said, oh, there's this other thing. So I took this other class, aced that. Then he came and had a chat and says, there are these other ones. And if you take them, instead of just getting an AA, you can also get an ASC. So you have 2 degrees. It'll give you bragging rights. Because I told him about my dad. He says, maybe your dad will. It didn't work, but that's a different story. That's when I happened upon computing. So I took Fortran, Ace Fortran, Ace COBOL, Ace Basic. I ended up, doing so well that University of Miami says, hey, we'll give you a scholarship to come do a bachelor's. Oh, he says, okay, that sounds like fun. But I've got, I finished my private pilot's license, got it, and then went on to University of Miami, which I'm glad I did because that's how I met my wife. But that's a different story. Get into Miami and started studying systems analysis. Met Doc Kuruz, and Doc Kuruz was on the engineering team of the space shuttle up in Cape Canaveral. So he takes a shining to me because we did this. There's something called stochastics. That's, probabilistic models and everything else, which he said he'd never had anybody get 98 out of 100 before. And he'd been teaching for 20 odd years, blah, blah, blah,
Your dad must have been happy with that, surely.
So now the thing is, that's when I started getting used to what I was alluding to earlier. I'd walk into a class and I'd be the only African,
Okay.
Yeah.
And
In fact, I remember walking into one professor's class and he says, Sonny, I think you have the wrong class. And I said, no, I think I'm right. He says, oh, no, this is deterministic models for, ambivalent models. I says, yes, sir, but what I need to know is the iterative process. And the guy freaked out.
I'm sure if he's still with us, he will probably remember that because
Exactly.
it challenged a stereotype that he had, clearly.
So Prof. Guru's arm twisted me. I ended up doing my postgrad, helping him do reentry orbit calculations for the space shuttle, because they're all probabilistic models. So you have
Yeah.
to take in weather, take in a few, and that's where my love for neural networks started. So yep, and did that, but in Nigeria, it's mandatory for you to do what we call the National Youth Service. So went back. By the way, on graduation, when I got my bachelor's, my dad finally, he says, okay, because it was with highest honors and all of that. He says,
Okay.
now maybe, yeah. And to prove the point, he showed up in Miami. So that was
Amazing. Amazing.
But went back to Nigeria and I ended up in ALF, which funnily enough, he was chairman of, but that's different. Again, him and the French were cool. And they didn't think, can I say this in public? Yeah, why not? It's the truth. French racism is a different form of racism. It's intellectual racism.
In what way?
Well, they have a way of the ultimate human is a Frenchman.
Okay.
That's the
Yeah.
French
Okay. Yeah.
psyche.
Totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. Yeah.
So your aspiration as a human must be to be a Frenchman.
Yeah.
So if you're a cocky American trained Englishman like me, you know. So, but I was fortunate in that my boss was Scottish. So I will forever,
Brilliant.
in a French, yeah, I
Yeah,
will forever ever worship Stuart Moore for that reason, simply because if he hadn't, I wouldn't have become head of data processing. They wouldn't, because they didn't believe I had anything. You know, let me tell you how bad. I built a data center. Okay, I designed and built a data center in Apapa in Lagos, and they had me go on holiday so that they could fly people in to check out if it was real.
that's insane.
I saw the report, and the guys who says that anybody could do this in Africa because the technical details and I went on and on and on.
And was this all the training that you'd and all the, everything you'd learned in Miami that you developed this incredible knowledge
Oh,
base?
I mean, look, we were doing seismics with Landmark in Nigeria. Okay, that's pattern recognition software, and I'm talking of the 80s.
Yes, that's insane that you were so advanced in the 80s because that's I'm not technical, but
So, unfortunately, my dad died, so I had to leg it out of Nigeria because I lost my brother, who would have been top cover. And
yeah.
Nigeria is not easy terrain. So I was actually supposed to be grieving, when uh M&S and I hit, and it was like, dude, we like your head, and I said, okay, what you gonna do about that? But they ended up flying my family in and everything else and looking after me. So,
And was that
um,
in the UK? Was that in the
yeah.
UK?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I'm very, very proud of my membership of the M&S family for that reason. It's the longest place I've ever worked, for anybody. And that is primarily because of three different individuals. Um, One of them was my boss. We call him Obi-Wan Kenobi, Dr. Simon Orabigon, who has a PhD in nuclear physics. So you figure that one. All right. You think I'm brainy?
Okay, I've got no idea where to start there.
Exactly.
I accept anything you say. It's
Exactly.
beyond my pay grade.
And so S-Jog was amazing. The other person that was responsible for my stint at Marks and Spencer like that was Simon's boss, whose grandfather started the company. That was Johnny Saka. And Johnny took a shining to me first. I mean, it's because of Johnny. I mean, let me tell you a story about Johnny. One evening, okay, I'm IT research. You can imagine just down there, he's on the board. And so say, right, tomorrow when you come into the office, make sure you bring your passport. Okay, Johnny, no problems. So I show up, and come to my office. So I show up and by the way, be there or be square at 7 o'clock. I'm looking, we start work at 9.
Yeah.
Anyway, cut long story short, 7 o'clock, I get there, he's all ready to go, hit his car, get to the airport. We're on Concord.
Concord. Wow.
Get to New York, meet the
How
research.
long did it take to get to New York? How long did
Sorry,
it take? How long did it take to get to New York? If you can recall.
less than about 4 hours, 3.5, 4 hours,
Incredible.
something like that. Get to New York, do the meeting with the research board, that morning, and hit back, get on the trip, and where I'm getting home at 10 o'clock at night that same day.
Wow, that's insane. So in New York. So I'm assuming you're flying from
So
London.
I'm telling I get home and I'm telling her, oh, you left very early, you're home very late. I said, you're not gonna believe, I just had lunch in New York. And she goes and says, I hope you're not smoking dope.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And
So, it was it's still the best, most fun job of all times that I've had, was the M&S role because what did I do? I did things like massively parallel programming. Okay.
what does that mean? Sorry.
Sorry?
What does that mean for the uninitiated?
All right, massively parallel programming. Right now, your computers work one at a time. Imagine if you could stitch 50 of them up together and get them to do work.
Mind boggles. The mind boggles how you even attempt to do that.
Yeah. So that's what MPP does, you know. And it's so if you look at what's running your clouds today, you're running on MPP systems. Your
Okay.
Amazon
Okay. Yeah.
cloud,
Yeah.
those are running on. So I was doing that with, Bob McClatchy at Oxford. I was doing things that think with Nicholas Negroponte at MIT. I was doing stuff with Dame Wendy Dench at
Really?
Southampton
Okay.
University, so it was proper. I mean, I did radio frequency tagging and I tested it out in South Africa because Marks and Spencer owns Woolworths in South Africa. And they had the ambient temperatures that I could use to test at that time because the chips weren't, you know, uh, anyway, but you get the idea.
Mm.
It was those kind of fun, crazy tech things. And of course, the bottom line was, so how do we make money out of this and what's the money for us? So we did things like at that time, M&S was the third largest credit card company in the UK. So I could do customer profiling that you wouldn't believe.
That's so, and we're talking probably in the 80s, are we? Is this 80s or 90s? And
Correct.
you're able to do that now? Sorry, then?
Yeah, because nobody knew how to do it. And, so they just looked like me like a god. I'm like, how does he do that? I said, no, no, no. Here are the top 150 customers we have on our credit card system. If you write them and offer them more credit, they will accept. And they come back, 80% of them would accept. And this is, how did you know that? But it's simple data analytics. We know how to do that today. So it was those kind of things. And then of course I met Nicholas, met Chonka, Bill Gates, the whole bunch, at the time. And so we knew the internet was coming. I tried to get the M&S people to see that. I actually built the first website for M&S. I registered marksandspencer.com and I pitched the board. And you know what? They went for a paper catalog instead.
It's insane.
I resigned. I wrote them the Clueless Manifesto.
What's the clueless manifesto?
It's about the fact, Clueless Manifesto are when you have a group of people who come together,
Mm.
okay, and so have so much self-belief, okay, that they're ignorant of the environment around them.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense.
You become so insular that nothing outside until it breaks you, and then but fortunately they caught on eventually, and to their credit, a few years ago they came back and said, yes, you were right. Online now represents a significant part of M&S revenues.
Imagine though, I guess we shouldn't look back, but imagine if they adopted it because they would have been so far ahead of the game.
They couldn't see it coming. And then, of course, out of that, because I'd been working with them, PwC, EY, and who was it? Deloitte.
Okay.
Yeah, they all made me offers to join, but EY had the most nascent practice, and they could barely spell e-commerce, so I joined them because I liked transformation. And we built a practice around what we called clicks and mortar at that time. So bringing the old school, mortar institutions like Marks and Spencer, Sainsbury's, and others with the new click brigade that was based on the internet.
So you were at the epicenter of that transition for companies to look at going online and to transact and to do things. You were kind of like leading it.
Well, we rode, I'd like to believe I surfed that wave. Okay, it was a wave and we were surfing.
Was it exciting? Was it exciting
Right?
at the time?
Oh, yeah,
was it exciting?
It was exciting. Of course it was.
Mm.
I mean, lastminute.com came at that time. I could go on and on about things. But the critical thing for me at that point was, first and foremost, it was the first time I was seeing companies being built from scratch. And that's what I found fascinating. From I have an idea to I have 100 employees. I still find that fascinating till today. And that's what I chose to spend my time understanding. So by the time, oh God, what's his name? And the young lady, the model and the Buccaneer, as I called them, the Bocus.com lot, who became Boo.com, by the time they
Okay.
came along, because of some of the things I'd done, I'd sort of been established as, yeah, he's the guy that knows about. So I got involved, in terms of helping them with the strategy of how they would assimilate or they would titillate the big brands. Because the whole idea was if you can get Nike, Adidas, all the big brands, okay, aggregated online in one place, then all the kids in all the universities would by default come there. Because remember, at this time, we hadn't factored the whole world in, and the internet was primarily dominated as an academic.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, as an academic. So it was like, how do we make money out of academia? That was the raison d'etre. And they'd cracked that by saying we can sell them the things they buy, like sportswear, and we have a distribution logistics component to it, which sounded, so of course I worked with them and, I had partners who knew the finance side. I came at it purely from here's how you architect it and all of that working seamlessly. So you can imagine we get excited. Oh, we're going to need this for license, that, we did the budgeting and lo and behold, there was funding, you know. But, it's one thing for the money to come in. It's another thing about the way it goes out. And that's one of the critical things I learned um, at that point is, when it comes to navigating startups, especially in explosive growth, if you try traditional corporate mechanisms, which is what we were doing, don't forget we come from running corporates.
Yeah.
So we knew finance inside out, we knew forecasts inside out. What we didn't know about were things like burn rate and runway.
Okay. That's really
Okay.
interesting. So that's really interesting. So I'm not sure whether let me ask a question
Yeah, please go ahead.
on that, and then I want to ask about boo.com because I think that totally relates to this podcast. So what's fascinating about that, the nuance that you described in terms of the difference between working as a corporate, money in, money out, understanding runway, sorry, to how that will differ from if you're a startup. Is there a fundamental difference in terms of how we need to operate and think between a
Yes.
corporate and a startup?
Yes. Okay. Because you see, look, for corporate, once you become a corporate, uh, the corporate status quo is the vision of the startup when you're starting is to get there. And that status quo is managing, it's almost like thinking of the difference between managing adults and managing children.
Yeah.
I draw parallel with my wife because she runs Montessori schools. All right. And I says, yeah, it's funny that we're very similar because what I do is like running a Montessori school for startup ventures. You're not going to use the same technique to teach Montessori kids as you are university kids. University kids are corporate. Okay. They've already broken down. Oh, what are you? I'm a marketing executive. Oh, what are you? Oh, no, no, no. I'm into sales. I'm not into marketing. Oh, what are you? Well, I actually focus on customer relationship management, not sales, not marketing. Can you see that? In a startup, guess what? All three are interlinked and it's one person doing it. And you better know how. You will grow up to be three, but you start with doing those three jobs as one person. And it's that integrated role responsibility matrix that makes the startup different.
Which is really important. And I can imagine that a lot of founders and startups potentially don't, unless they read your book or follow you or other people that have trodden the boards, you can get that wrong quite easily, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, that's why I just recently had to put out an article on the difference between SMEs and startups, which is where the other confusion is.
So I've written that down as a question to ask you. So please, if you can clarify the difference between an SME and a startup, I would love to know the nuances between those two.
Okay, let me give you three quick ones that you need to,
Okay.
the first and most important is what we call the risk profile. Okay. An SME is bankable by microfinance or a regular bank because they have what we call a known risk profile. All right. Why is that? Because their business model is known. If you're a hotel, you're a hotel, you're a hotel, you're going to charge people per night. Maybe you charge them for food and drinks or you do something. But guess what? You're a hotel, you're a hotel. If you're a restaurant, guess what? You're a restaurant. Yeah, you might be a 5-seater or a 10-seater or a 50-seater. Da, 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 da. You're a restaurant. You serve food. Now, when you come to a startup, what do you do? Oh, we're like, but we're not. We're just like, you try and describe Uber before Uber started, or, try and describe Amazon before Amazon came along. And you start to get the challenge of describing a new business model. Okay, so that's the second part. The fundamental thing is they're not mutually exclusive. An economy needs both of them. Why is that? You need the SMEs to remain stable and sustainable as an economy. And you need the startups to push the boundaries of your markets so you have expansion and you're creating new jobs.
That totally makes sense. And I've never thought of it like that before. So what I wanted to go back to is EY. At EY, I'm not sure what year this was, but you were part of a project, and I think this is in your book, Investment Worthy Startup,
Yeah.
where Boo.com came along, which was a project.
Yeah.
I let you fill in the blanks, but I think it was a very interesting project in terms of huge potential, didn't quite work, lots of learnings.
Well, I think if memory serves me right, I ran into the two co-founders of Boo.com. It would have been mid to late 1998. I believe it was. Yeah, it would be about that time. And yeah, as you said, I was EC at EY, and the thing was, we thought we got everything right in terms of planning and structuring, and probably more importantly, we had an amazing EY team. Senior members out of Boston, all kinds of people. Yeah. The only reason they listened to me was I was the tech geek that understood the tech part, but the financing and the marketing and they had it down pat to a T. And so we were punching air. You can imagine, I think, we must raise, I remember getting to the key thing is I remember getting to the $100 million raised. Okay, that was
Incredible. But
yeah,
1998, 1999, wow.
that was like the turn of the century because we were saying, because if you remember, everybody had focused on the millennium bug.
Yeah.
So, half EY was paranoid about that, while we were looking at Boo saying, hey guy, because they launched, um, was it before 2000? I think they launched, sorry, my memory is not but I think they launched about that. The whole millennium and Boo are sort of
Yeah.
intertwined.
Yeah.
It,
I get it. I get it.
for
I
you
get it.
to unpack them. But the key thing was this is guess what? By May 2000, it was in receivership.
By May 2000. So in quite a short period after,
Yeah.
it pretty much collapsed.
But you got it. 100 million up in smoke. So of course, as EY does, we all sat down, what went wrong, how do you, and what I learned personally from there is just sort of, you know, um, that led me to create the poem framework, because it was a major dot-com failure, and you need a resilient, adaptable foundation to succeed. That's what came out, came through to me through that. And it boiled down to, yes, the vision was clear, but the delivery vehicle was incomplete. And that's what was wrong, was we didn't have the KPIs to tell us what was going wrong when they were going wrong. Why? Because we're relying on traditional. You see, if you look at on corporate audit is what? It's once a year. You do your report at month end, and it's a balance sheet and blah, blah, blah. So you have monthly reporting, quarterly reporting. Work in the world of startups is real time. And it's a question of how much cash and where do you go? You've got to measure where are the people who's doing what. So it was in doing that analytics that it came to me that, well, hang on, what exactly is a business anyway? A business is nothing more than a promise. Okay? Paul Padmore promises you guys once a month, once a week, once a period, you will get 30 minutes, 20 minutes off, Bloomberg. It's a promise. Okay? And a promise is only as good as what?
Your word.
It. You got it. So hence proposition and organization. All right?
So it feels like that situation gave you almost a eureka moment and a point of clarity in that you're able to pick the bones out of what happened and come up with a robust formula which would enable you. I guess we'll get into the angel investment stuff in a minute, but where you're able to give people that you invest in that framework. Now would be a lovely, I guess, segue to lean into I believe this is your first angel investment. So would you be able maybe to chronicle your first angel investment, how that came about? Because you did phenomenally well. I'm not sure whether that is a standard that everybody can achieve as a not just a first time investment, but maybe even a lifetime investment as an angel investor.
Yeah, I think it's more like I look, maybe I don't know if I'd say first time lucky, but that's the way it comes across now, because I talk about my 3 S's. So rather than just talk about the first one, I'm going to talk about the 3 S's, and then at the end you'll understand why there are 3 S's. The first S, which is my first investment, I'd met the founder while I was at M&S. And he was a South African, I am Nigerian. So Mandela goes to South Africa, Obasanjo goes to Nigeria. We both go back to home countries. I get a call one day saying, hey, guy, my cousin and I are doing a superheroes comic. Oh, really? Superheroes? All right, good. Sounds cool. So what you gonna have? Oh, well, we're gonna have Chaka the Zulu, and we want to see if you can come up with Mansa Musa, as superheroes. These are African, says, okay, good. So think about it, do some research. A few weeks later, you told me, you know what, guy, let's think this through. If we really want it to be successful, have you ever heard of Roy of the Rovers?
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
I know. Well, why don't we do an African Roy of the Rovers? So they went to work, they did, and we started distribution using the Sunday newspapers in South Africa. Did it in Nigeria, started distributing through an outlet called Mr. Biggs, which is owned by the UAC. We got to 17 countries, I think it was, and 500,000 copies a month.
In Africa?
Yeah. Okay. Well, no, this is purely Africa.
Okay.
And what I forgot to say is, I put some money in to get us all started. I put in $5,000. So about 4, 5, maybe 6 years later, I get a call saying, oh, we're trying to do animations, 3 minutes shorts and all of that. Hey, sounds good. So they're trying it out, and somebody catches it, and these guys come in and say, hey, we want 51% of the company because we like what you're going to do and we believe animation is the future. All right, what's that got to do with me? Well, you own enough shares. We need to take half your shares for us to make our 51%. All right, fine. I only paid $5,000 for it anyway. I hope I get my money back, you know. And then they want me the money. I can't sleep because I'm thinking they're going to think I'm a fraudster if yeah. And anyway, I call the founder and say, hey, this is what's happening. He says, yep, that's the right amount. I got mine too. I've even bought a house. So that was 100x of what I
100x.
100x of what I
And okay, so for everybody listening and watching, I don't know whether can you say the amount that you got? I guess that people can work it out, but can you say the amount?
I got 250,000 for a $5,000 investment.
Which you made probably about 5 years before,
I'd
prior,
made 7 years before.
seven years before. That's phenomenal. And you were expecting about 25, something like that.
Correct.
That's
I was
insane.
expecting 25 for 5. I got 250. No, I got 250 for 2,500.
Okay, okay. Which is mind-boggling.
Exactly.
That's
So of
mind-boggling.
course, that's when I start saying, I mean, this can be happen. And just about the time I got the money, I told you I've been in tech. I'd worked with Intel, Microsoft. There's stories I can tell about that. But I get a call from Intel saying, hey, we understand you are working with, we just heard you're working with founders. There's this guy who we like, but too small. He's just starting out. Can you take a look at him? Says, of course. And that's how I met Dr. Ashifi Gogo, who is the founder of Sproxil, Sproxil. And Ashifi at that time was doing his PhD out in the States, and he'd come up with a way of protecting drugs, which is now called pharmacovigilance. So, you buy a scratch card and it comes with a set of numbers. You send it with a free SMS and it tells you if the drug is genuine or fake. Now, in Nigeria and emerging markets where 40 to 60% of drugs are fake, you can imagine how life-saving that is. Cut the long story short, I'm still with Ashifi. We've done over 100 million verifications. The company is now in India, Kenya, amongst other countries.
Phenomenal.
My third the investment for Sproxil came from the striker who I mentioned. So
Situation, yeah.
I wanted to talk about opodo.co.uk,
Okay.
which we built for the airlines at Sapient. And so I was trying to do the same with this young man in Nigeria. It was called Slim Trader, and we onboarded a couple of airlines. He managed to raise $1 million. I had put in $60,000. I got $360 back.
You got how much back?
$360
$360.
for a $60,000 investment.
Okay, so what's obviously I wish you did better on that investment. So what was going through your mind? Were you confused about how one could go so well and then how another?
No,
No.
not at all, because I saw it coming. Okay, and I helped to actually wind it down, and I made sure the founder went through the process of bringing it to a close neatly.
Okay.
Because again, this is the advantage of the framework. Okay, we had seen that the market was non-existent.
Okay. Okay. So you were starting to see this. So in hindsight now, in 2024 hindsight even, when you are going through investments now, I'm keen to ask you a question about angel investment as well, so people can understand how they can better understand it, and if they're a founder, how maybe they can understand better how to approach angel investors. But with 2024 hindsight, the framework and the understanding that you have now, would you say that you would be better prepared or to maybe look at investments in terms of that's a good investment to take, or maybe it's not because they haven't gone through maybe the poem framework or something like that? I haven't framed that very well, but I'm hoping you can pick for the bones of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, the framework itself has matured, and I've left it online so that people can see its evolution for that reason.
Okay.
So when we started aggressively using it in, I believe it would be 2019 or maybe slightly earlier, impact was not a key consideration. It has since form part of startup economics in light of where the world is today. So these are not static performance indicators.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the key thing, I want to get across is if you're planning to unlock growth in this high-paced evolutionary environment that we're working with, okay, the POEM framework does offer that structured approach to measuring and driving your startup.
Okay.
But understanding the metrics within each of the pillars is what's going to help you navigate the critical stages of your fundraising journey.
Which is great to have that. Which is great to
Sorry?
have that. Because if you don't have anything to measure, or just to give you an equation where you're just, I guess, more aware, you're more conscious of what's going on, that can, I guess, can be pivotal in that journey.
Yep, correct. So, I mean, if you look at it, we've talked about POEM, right? Proposition, organization, economics, and milestones, right? So when we talk about proposition, what are the key metrics? Product market fit. It's the holy grail of any startup.
Yeah.
Okay, look for metrics that indicate customer satisfaction, such as Net Promoter Score or customer retention rates. A high NPS and growing customer base can say, yeah, that signals that people not only love the product, but they're recommending it to others.
Yeah.
Then, of course, we've got to look at CAC, which is the customer acquisition cost, okay, to acquire new customers compared to the CLV, which is the lifetime value.
So there's a lot to, I guess, to understand and to be aware of.
Yeah.
As a
Correct.
founder, and
Yeah.
I guess as an investor. So I'm keen to get your thoughts on, I guess, investment, angel investment, and Africa, maybe. So I heard you say something on one of your interviews that where you talked about angel investment and you said it's a local sport. If you're maybe in Africa, your nuances and understanding of investment opportunities in Lagos, Nigeria, is probably going to, not probably, it's going to be a lot better than somebody that's maybe more London centric or Germany centric. I don't know whether you can speak on that.
Well, yes, and it is this. What is the nature of a startup? It is a commercial solution, all right, to a social problem.
Agreed?
Are you with me?
Yeah, agreed.
We accept that that's what defines a venture, all right? Then the question starts, who has the problem?
You'll define an audience, or there will be a segment of society that you would have identified that will have that challenge, that problem.
And we agree that they're the people who are going to fork out the money to solve the problem that they have. All right. Now, the question then becomes, can you solve the problem for them remotely? So in short, can I sit in Nigeria and solve a problem for a Chinese guy? If it's a global problem, maybe, as we're doing with telecoms, okay, but even then we're finding out that in Nigeria you use satellite, in other places you use fiber, you go here, you use. So again, the point I'm trying to make is it starts from the market. If you want to have a decent conversation about anything to do with, you start from the market. Which market are we talking about? The reason you and I can have the conversation we're having right now is because we're in a certain market. And the prevailing conditions of those doesn't mean we're without electricity. It doesn't mean that our bandwidth capability is restricted, as an example. So contextualizing is the beginning.
It totally makes sense to frame it like that. So when you are looking for, maybe you're getting founders that are approaching you and they're looking for angel investment, what is that like? I don't know whether there's a percentage of founders that come, they're ready, their business is in shape and they're ready to be considered. The reason I'm asking the question, because there might be some founders that might be thinking, I'm keen to, we need investment for our company. We just think we do. But maybe you get some founders that come, actually, they're not quite ready. They haven't done the groundwork. They don't have that core evidence that they're in the right shape. Are you able to speak on that to maybe articulate when a founder might be ready within their business to actually start seeking angel investment, or maybe when you're not quite ready for that?
Okay. The first thing is we've got to separate readiness from worthiness. Yeah. And the thing is, I bring up the concept of worthiness simply because that's where the investors start from.
Okay.
If,
Really. So I hadn't even thought about that.
yeah, if I'm an engineer in construction and I've spent my life building buildings all across a particular city, and I've made a decent amount of money, I've raised my kids, I've got tenants in about 6 different buildings, what am I best placed to invest in the next generation? It is a knowledge of building buildings. So if a founder is coming to me and what he wants to do is agri-tech, it's not that he's not investment ready. He's just not investment worthy to me.
Okay.
Are you with me?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, okay. So I'm thinking of a different question now. So if you're a founder, as part of your due diligence, when you're seeking an angel investor, to seek an angel investor who has got some traction in your space where you think, but they're more likely to consider my proposition worthiness.
All investors worth their salt have something called an investment thesis. All right? Their investment thesis is their basis of investing. So people will tell you, if you're not technocentric, TD is not going to touch you. People will tell you, if you don't have a female founder, they won't invest in you. People will tell you, oh, they only do circular economy, etc., etc., etc. So your responsibility, your first responsibility is to typify yourself. What industry do I belong to? What solution set am I bringing? And then to say, okay, who are the investors who by their money, not by their mouth, okay, have demonstrated that they're investing in my space. That's why the two Maxes, Max Couvalier and Maxime Bayon, are good friends of mine. They write something called Africa, the Big Deal Substack. Okay, it is tracking every investment over $100,000 that's declared in the public domain and has been doing so since 2019. So you can tell which investor is investing in which space based not on what they've said, but where they've actually put their money. I trust that helps.
Does help. Helps a lot. You give value because I get a lot more than I asked for in your answer. So thank you so much. So you've answered this question before, but I'm keen for people that haven't listened to your videos or read your content to ask a question. So forgive me that it's going to be a repetitive question for you, but I'm keen to understand the difference between an angel investor and a VC for people that don't quite understand the difference between that.
Oh, that's a very, very easy one. Okay. And in fact, there are nuances on angel investing, as people will now tell you, because TD's come along and made a glorification of it. But the fundamental difference between an angel investor and a VC is very simple. Whose money are you getting from them? Okay. When a check is written to you as a founder, whose money is it? With an angel, it's from their pocket. Okay. It's their personal cash. Like in my case, as my wife used to argue, you're spending the kids' school money. Now the kids are graduated. Oh, you're spending the grandkids' school money. Well, if I didn't finish spending the kids' school money and they graduated, I'm unlikely to finish spending the. So that's the first thing is angels spend their own money. However, VCs get more money to spend because they do what angels don't do. So they go to people like angels and say, you know what, instead of spending, you give me that money and I'm going to put it together with other people's money and I'll invest on your behalf. So VCs are investing other people's money.
Yeah, okay.
Angels are investing their own money. However, before you go, I've got to clarify that there are two people in VC. Angel, one person. All right. VC, two people. There's a front-end person and there's a back-end person in VC. The front-end person called the general partner is the guy that actually does the investing. Okay? The back-end person like me, called the LP, the limited partner, is the guy that give them the money to go invest.
So I didn't know all this, so thank you. Wonderful. So how are we doing for time? Because I've definitely gone over the time. So how are we for time?
Well, the good news is I don't have a hard stop for another 37 minutes.
Okay, cool. If I can ask you a few more questions, I just want to tease as much out of you as I possibly can. So I wanted to ask around African Business Angel Network. I know that I think I read somewhere, or certainly I saw somewhere, that in 2015, I think there were about 5-ish hubs that existed in Africa. You've done a fabulous job of massively improving that. That's grown significantly. I believe at this point in time, we have 50 plus. So
72.
Okay, 72. Okay, so that's hot off the press. So there's over 70. So if you can maybe answer two questions really. One, what you guys do at African Business Angel Network and why it's so important for these hubs to be emerging in Africa particularly.
Okay, what does ABAN do? ABAN helps to nurture angel investing on the continent, and that manifests in different ways. One is to educate. Two is to aggregate. And three is to guide through policy. So in terms of educate, the African Angel Academy, which came out of ABAN and is independent of ABAN today, actually trains and develops angel investors on a personal basis. On the aggregation, ABAN continues to support the creation of angel investment networks on a city-by-city basis, and most recently on a thematic basis, thanks to the European Union.
I love the fact that you're educating and you're actually giving sort of the framework for people to know how to invest, what the protocols are, because you need that. If you don't have that, then it can be to the untrained, somebody even like me, it can be, it's thin air. You don't know what you're doing.
And what we've then done, which was the third part, which was hard not to crack, is policy. We supported the creation of the national startup acts across Africa. It started in Tunisia, Senegal, Nigeria has now passed it, which recognizes angel investors legally in the country, but more importantly, incentivizes their work.
What's the process been like to bridge the different African regions? Has that been a challenging process, or is this spirit that everybody knows how important entrepreneurship is and innovation and technology?
It's a bit of both, okay? Incontrovertible Africa breaks down into the following. You've got Anglophone Africa. You've got Francophone Africa. You have Lusophone Africa. You have Southern Africa. And you have Arabia, Africa, which is North Africa. These are economies of their own. So you will find that it's easier to do Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, than it is to do Nigeria, Senegal, Ghana.
Okay,
even though all three are on the West Coast.
So there's nuances there that need to be understood. With that being said, I guess it's pretty obvious that when you're working on something and you know that there's, say, Ghana and Nigeria as an example, you know that the framework and the process is going to be easier to blend those two regions together than it potentially would be to bring in maybe Kenya or Senegal.
No, bringing in Kenya is easy.
Really?
Because it's the same language, it's English.
Okay.
But going into Senegal, you go into French. And that's the challenge.
Yeah. Okay. So I was keen to ask you this, a bit of a selfish question, but in terms of, I guess, where you might see particular opportunities today, are there things that excite you today? So we spoke about when you started out, you were all about space and you got into that space, you're doing pilot stuff and whatnot. Is there an area today where you think actually this could be very interesting in 5, 10, 15 years?
Hmm. I don't know if I talked about holographic imaging earlier.
Briefly, we didn't go deeply into it. We touched upon it.
Okay, because I used the technology just to prove the point in 2012 to launch my Mobitel network in Lagos.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Oh, right. I thought maybe yeah.
Or maybe I missed that.
Yeah. Yeah, running a mobile, one of the first data networks in Lagos was one of the other crazy things I've done, but we can talk about it.
So like do you get, so just in terms of
Yeah.
some of the things that you've done over the years, do you get intimidated by, I guess I'm thinking, the reason I'm asking the question, because I'm probably thinking about me, where
Yeah.
I'm probably sort of, I'm maybe more risk averse, or
Mhm.
maybe I don't have the confidence, maybe because I haven't done the work to actually push the boundaries and do things that other people might give you that awkward look to say, Paul, what are you doing? That's not possible. What do you think of when you've got this idea and you think, yeah, I'm going to go with this. It feels right. Even if at that moment in time, you don't have the evidence, maybe you've got to start building the evidence.
Um, I I come from a slightly different mindset. Um, and I'm not religious, but I believe in God. And I believe in divine inspiration as my primary driver.
Mm.
So there are things I worry about, and there are things I don't for that reason.
Okay, I like that. I like that answer. I like that answer because it almost gives you I don't know whether this is my interpretation of that, but almost the freedom to, if something inspires you, that you can go with that as opposed to maybe being, I might be curtailed a little, but this is the way that my mindset exists. Definitely prefer your mindset. So I've written down a question here, and this is something that somebody asked me to ask you. So tech innovation as a catalyst for social impact in maybe Africa. Do you see tech can help with being a catalyst for social impact in Africa?
And that's what the Poem Framework says.
Yeah.
You can't be a startup without. Okay, the question is which aspect or what type of social impact are you bringing? There are 17 SDGs, okay, that have been laid out by the United Nations. The question is, of those 17, which one, okay, are we talking about here when we talk about your startup? All right. Is it number one, no poverty? Or, do we go to my favorite, number 5, which is gender? Yeah. So it'll depend, okay, on what it is you're building, the solution you're preferring. But if you are not addressing one or more of the SDGs, then you're probably in today's world not going to get too many people who give you the thumbs up.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And that makes sense. And that's good. I guess it's a good sat nav for us to see whether we're on the right track. Because if you don't do any, if our idea, I guess, isn't making a social impact, is there actual reason for doing it? Is there an actual real need for that particular solution that we're looking to create? So what I definitely will do, I'm going to get a link from you from your book.
Okay.
I want to put that in the show notes. I want people to be able to actually read with their own eyes and actually understand so they can put some of these ideas into place for them, how they can move this forward.
I just do you a synopsis very quickly on that point, which is here's everything in 10 seconds, all right, or less. If you have a vision that solves a real problem, okay, for real people on this planet, then the poem framework can bring it to life, because what poem says about those problems is you present it as a product service offering to a known customer base, predefined market. That is what your proposition is. What's the product? Who are the customers in which market? That's the proposition. And that proposition is delivered by an organization. Who is the organization? Well, it's the people, the owners, the founders, the executives, the employees, the partners, who use the processes, how they get things done, how they buy, how they make, how they sell, and technology to deliver the proposition. So the organization delivers the proposition. We then measure that organizational delivery of the proposition through the economics. First, we look at the capital, okay, that has been raised and how it has been deployed. And typically that is deployed as expenditure or burn rate to generate revenue, which is the profitability, the relationship between your revenue and the expenditure you use to generate it is the profitability. And the reason the profitability is important is because that is what returns the capital, which, you raised in the first place. And you're doing all of that while you're creating an impact based on one of the SDGs in the. So
Okay.
that's the economics of it. All of this is happening, okay, because of the milestones. What are those milestones? Well, as a startup, once you have your minimum viable product, guess what happens? You get angel funding, you go to pre-seed. From pre-seed, you get seed funding. And from seed funding, you get pre-series A. And from pre-series A, you go to series A. And as I say to people, once you're series A, guess what? Stop calling yourself a startup, you're a corporate. I trust that helps.
It's It does. That was a shrink wrap version. That should, obviously everyone's going to get the full video, but that piece there needs to be a nice, snug snippet for everybody to condense that, and they can just any founders can just have that on autoplay in the background, so it's just there for them, crystallized. We're getting towards the end now, but just a couple of questions. So, for as for angel investors, for I don't know, would-be angel investors, I guess in terms of you have a connection, you speak to a founder, you think actually like the idea. What's the behavior? How do they become a good angel investor? What is a good angel investor?
Well, first and foremost, why are you angel investing? Be true to yourself. Okay? Is it for the returns? Is it for the experience? Is it for both? Okay, what are your expectations? Be crystal clear on both of those, because that will enable you to engage with the right kind of capacity development mechanism you need for yourself to be able to do what you need to do. Because like everything else, okay, it takes paying attention and dedication too. You cannot be an angel investor with less than a portfolio, because the failure rate in startups is high, and you're not going to change that. What you've got to do is mitigate your risks by making sure you pick those that have a chance for success, and you pick as many of them as your pocket will afford. And that's why you need to stick to an area you understand so that it helps you pick the right ones.
Okay.
So those are the key things. Have a thesis so you know what it, because you see, if you don't have a big yes, you're not going to know what to say no to.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I've never heard that before, but that totally makes sense. That totally makes sense. I'm really conscious of the time I've taken up of you today. I really enjoyed listening to you and learning from you. So what I'm going to do, I've said this before, I'm going to put the link to your book in the show notes, encourage people to to get the book, read the book, learn from the book. And all things TD, where's the best place for people to find out for all things TD?
TomiDavies.com.
Okay, perfect. Put a link in the show notes. And my last question is, so this is a recurring question. So if you could invite 3 inspirational people for dinner, they could be a liable past. Who might you invite?
If I could invite 3 people to dinner, who would they be? I think the first person, funnily enough, would probably be Mandela. And who else? Isaac Asimov.
Don't know. So who's that? Sorry.
Sorry?
Who was that? Sorry, the last one.
Isaac Asimov.
Okay. I know the name, but I don't know that person, I'm sad to say.
Yeah, he's a sci-fi.
Okay. Okay.
A sci-fi aficionado, so to speak. And the third would be King Solomon.
That would be interesting to what you would cover in that dinner. That would be where you would go. The mind boggles in terms of what you would cover. That would be phenomenal. TD, I could talk to you and listen to you all day. As I said to you before we hit the record button, loads of content out there for us to absorb, to learn from. You've got the books, but you've also got loads of wonderful content on YouTube. And I would encourage anybody that if you happen to be in a country, I know you travel a lot doing various speaking engagements, for people to follow, check out where you are, and definitely can attend in person. Definitely do that.
Thank you.
TD, thanks for your time today.
Appreciate it. You take care.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you for tuning into this episode of My Perfect Failure. We're keen to grow the show. So if you are watching on YouTube, please do hit the subscribe button. And we're keen to hear about the things you like and equally the things you don't like. So you can find me at paul@myperfectfailure.com, or you can find me via the feedback page on the website. So take care for now. Bye.
Thanks for listening to My Perfect Failure podcast. Be sure to visit www.myperfectfailure.com to join the conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play. Look out for our next episode.